Hey everybody, Josh Hannaberry here
And Avery and I.
with the Truck Focus podcast. First off, I hope you're having a really good day. Super excited for today's episode as we have
Chris Harris.
That's right.
And Chris Harris is joining an episode today, and he was nice enough to let us join his podcast a couple weeks ago.
That's right. So stay tuned. Let's get to it. Hey, good day, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Truck Focus podcast. Avery and I are super excited to have Chris Harris join the podcast today. So Chris is the CEO of Dawg, a safety and compliance consulting company, and he actually owns his own podcast as well, the Dawg On It Trucking Podcast. So I highly recommend that you learn more about Chris by visiting his website. Just go to Safety Dawg, so safetydawg.com. So you see, Chris, he's been a mentor of mine from afar now for some time. So why I say that is prior to him knowing I existed, I was analyzing most of the content that he'd put online. And it was really encouraging being in a space where, like, I asked myself questions, he happened to have the answers. And then when I learned that he had a podcast too, that's really what I guess painted the picture for Avery and I to start dreaming up our own. And then I still remember the first couple conversations with Chris, just super, almost instant mentor. And that's my perception of our conversations. He was really willing to share information, but he also gave a lot of feedback and a lot of encouragement, which has really helped us to get to where we are today. So just, that's a long ramble of just why I'm excited to have Chris on. So welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me. Hi, Avery. How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm very good, Chris. We are both, all of us here are super excited for you to be on the podcast today. And we both thank you for letting us join your podcast a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and it was a great episode. I enjoyed having you on, especially, sorry, Josh, but especially the young voice. Well, because Avery might just be the future of trucking.
Totally agree. Yeah, that was something, well, a few things that you said throughout the podcast, and humor actually really installs what our vision is as a family for Avery. And in trucking, what that looks like is yet to be determined, but we appreciate the confidence you have in him. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
If we don't encourage the ones that are coming behind us to be first of all, awesome humans, and just plain good people, but also like what you're doing, and by having Avery join you on the podcast is great because he's learning new skills every day. And look at the confidence he has on camera. It's awesome.
Thank you very much, Chris. So, Chris, first of all, thank you for joining the podcast. But can you tell us, who is Chris Harris and what makes you you?
Well, first of all, I like to think I'm a good human. But I still have my tractor trailer license in my pocket, although I'm probably going to give it up this year. Being 66, I got to start in Ontario, where I'm from. I have to start going for a medical every year, and I truthfully haven't driven a truck in probably 10 years, at least for money. So why do I have it other than for bragging rights in front of the driver meeting to say, hey, I got my license? So I may be giving it up, but I was a driver at one time, and then I became an ops manager. And then, kind of more related to my career, I got into safety. And it was one of those things where I met a fella literally in a hallway, and you never know how things happen. I bumped into this guy, didn't know him, and he saw me stressed out, and he said, "You're coming for lunch with me." And anyways, after back and forth, he insisted I go for lunch with the guy. And it turns out he's the new safety manager at a trucking company. And with that, within a few months, I transferred into the safety department, that was the beginning of my career. And his name was Claude Chalk. And I worked for Claude for 5 years in the safety department. And he became my mentor. And, I owe Claude so much. But anyways, after I left the trucking company, I joined an insurance company as one of those safety reps that comes out and does the audits for the trucking industry. And 14 years doing that, and then I started my own deal. So I offer some of the same services, especially here in Ontario, where if you get in trouble with what we call the CVR, I know everybody else calls it the National Safety Code. But, you know, Ontario leads the world. We all know that. So, you know, and, and Albertans, you know, sometimes Ontario thinks they lead the world. And so we're the only ones that call it a CVOR number. But I really try to help fleets manage their CVOR and manage their insurance and train drivers on how to crash less. Yay! So that's Safety Dawg.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, Chris, my dad tells me that you have been involved in the trucking industry for quite some time now, and you have been able to do quite a different variety of jobs. And so, what was the first job you had and what was your favorite while working in the industry?
Well, my first job in the industry, I'm trying to think, did I ever clean? My dad and my grandfather owned a trucking company. And no, I don't think I ever cleaned the office. So I guess my first job was a helper on a store that you might not even remember because they're gone out of business, but you might, because it's not that long ago, Sears. The Sears
Yes.
company, I was a helper on a delivery truck for 2 or 3 summers as a summer job. And then I got into the restaurant business, believe it or not, as a restaurant manager. And it was the only job I ever got fired from, was a restaurant management job. And when I was unemployed, I said, what am I going to do? Anyways, I had a 1 child at the time. I'm blessed with 2 kids. But at that time, when I got fired, I had 1 kid and a mortgage. And so I went back to driving truck at the Sears contract. And so now I graduated from helper to driver, and I was on the Sears contract. And believe it or not, I ended up never quitting because I got into Avery, this is a life story for you. It's one of those moments. If you give me the pleasure of telling you, I was a truck driver doing Sears delivery and hated it. Hated it. Because here I am with a college education driving a truck. And I couldn't quit my job because every job with my big college education that I could have gotten, that I was qualified for, would have paid me less than my truck driving job. And as I said, I already had a kid and a mortgage.
Oh.
One day, literally, I hated going to work. And so one day I was having one of these talks with myself where I said, what's wrong? Like, why do you hate going to work? And so I went through a long list of reasons why I hated going to work. Well, it must be the people I work with. You know, and I looked at the people in my mind. This is all one of those conversations that you have with yourself, right? But I look at the people that I work with, and they're all great. They're great people. They're good humans. They're great guys. Well, it must be my boss. Well, no, same thing. It wasn't my boss. Well, it's got to be the company. No, it's got to be Sears. No. I finally had this revelation that the only reason I hated the job was in here, because I felt it was beneath me. And the day I had that revelation was the day I woke up and said, well, if I'm not going to quit my job, I'm going to find ways to love my job. And from that day forward, I went to work on a regular basis, and I enjoyed doing my job. And it wasn't 3 months later that my boss calls me into the office, and he swore, but he says, hey, Chris, what's wrong with you? And I said, well, Dave, his name was Dave Bapty. If Dave ever listens to this, he might remember the story. I don't know. But he calls me into the office and he says, basically, what the F is wrong with you? I said, what's wrong, Dave? He said, Chris, come on. Every day you used to be in here bitching, moaning, and complaining about something. I haven't seen you in such a long time. What's up? And so I told him I had this revelation. I changed my attitude. And, you know, I mean, this conversation probably took a half an hour, but he slaps me on the back and he says, great, you're my new driver trainer. Well, so that was my first promotion. And Avery, the story for you that I want you to take away is it was up here in my head. And as soon as I changed my attitude towards my job changed their attitude towards me.
Totally.
So the change has to be within. So anyway, and that's a true story, honest to God.
Wow.
And so I became the driver trainer, and then later on I became the assistant manager, and then I became the manager, and then we lost the contract, and then T&T took over the contract. T&T said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going back to driving." They said, "We need a manager." So I moved to quit my job and moved over to T&T, became the manager for that contract, and then later on became the safety department for the company. Like, it's just, and then Avery, I've written a book. If my grade 10 English teacher ever found out I wrote a book, I think she'd die. If she might be dead. If this dummy could, anyways. So I wrote a book on how to hire drivers, right? It's just something I know about. So anyways, that's a quick kind of life story. But the part that I wanted to, pass on to you and your listeners is that it's up here in your head, and your attitude determines so much of our life.
Yep.
So true. Wow. I didn't know that about you. So thanks for So it's interesting where, like, I hear different people share similar analogies all the time. And my basketball coach years ago that I try and install in Avery is attitude is everything. And when you look at something, or how you look at something, and when you change how you look at it, what you're looking at changes. And yeah, that really aligns with our way of thinking. So I appreciate you being that honest. And that's neat. That's a really healthy progression. I think a lot of people don't realize in our industry exists, because I talk to drivers quite often too. And yeah, I hate the term just. What do I know? I'm just a driver. And it's like, no, I'm going to beat that out of you. You are not just a driver. You are a key asset to this, not just to our economy, to the organization, to your family. So a lot of what you highlighted definitely resonates well with, I say, my mindset too. And that's pretty neat. So I guess at what point then did you shift from employee mindset, you're working your way up in the ranks, to the consulting space? How did that transition happen?
Well, without naming names, I had a falling out with my boss. It happens sometimes. And I was 56 or 7 at the time. And truthfully, what happened is I got along really well with this individual, and I liked him a lot. And after my divorce was done, I went to him and I said, "Hey, look, I'm going to start my consulting company up again, because, divorce is expensive. Retirement is looming in 10 years, I hope." That didn't happen. Retirement is looming. Divorce is expensive. I need a little part-time gig. So he knew all about it. I told my immediate boss, my manager, what I was doing. And this went on for several months. And then one day I get a call, and I'm told to be in the president's office. What the heck? So anyways, I walk in at my appointed time. I asked my boss, "What's up?" He wouldn't tell me. So I knew it was nothing good. And I walk into the president's office, and there's the president, there's the head of HR, and there's my boss. And the president did all the talking, and the president said, "Hey, you've got this consulting company on the side. It's a conflict of interest." Again, this is a much longer conversation that happened, but
yes,
the short story is, it's a conflict of interest. You got to shut it down. Well, the very next day, I had rented a hotel room and had food purchased, and I had 25 people signed up coming to an event that Safety Dawg had organized. And this was in November. And so I had a choice to make that night. I either quit my job or I quit Safety Dawg. And so November was no time, in my opinion, to start being self-employed. So I canceled the event that I had the next day, and postponed everything. Then the first working day of January that year is when I quit. The part where I had the falling out with my boss is that he sat in this meeting and never once acknowledged to the president that he knew all about it. And if he hears this interview, sorry, but that's why I quit, and you didn't have my back, is that was the bottom line. And when I realized my boss didn't have my back, I knew I didn't want to work there any longer. And being an old guy, I was in my late 50s at the time. I think it was 58. What are your choices?
Right.
You know, who's going to hire a guy with all the gray and everything? And I was fortunate that my financial structure was sound enough that I could go off on my own. And hey, it's been a lot of fun. And well, this is Avery. This is the big thing. Being on my own now, as you know, I've started a podcast. I've started a YouTube channel. I've written a book. I've really tried to go out of my way to help trucking companies, and people like like Josh reached out. I'll answer any question. You know, my role has totally changed, and I believe that the money will come by serving people and being honest and being the best you can be by serving people. I just believe the money will come. So anyways, that's where I went.
That's incredible. And I can speak on behalf of some of industry in the West, where I'm grateful you're in the position you are because of the impact and the honesty. And you say it like it is. I like that. I like where there's no, I'm going to guess at this answer. It is if I don't know the answer, I will find you the answer approach. And your reputation in the West is really strong, and it's just, So all of that said, obviously it's not the most comfortable being in those meetings, but our industry, myself and Avery, we're really grateful that you're in the position that you're in. So that means a lot.
Well, for a lot of your listeners, they, if they are from the West, I mean, when I was working for the insurance company, Alberta was part of my territory. So my sister lives in Edmonton, and at least 4 times of the year, I had to come out to Alberta and do the fleet inspections. Most of our fleets in Alberta were cattle haulers. So most of our business was Calgary and South when I was there. But I always made it to see my sister in Edmonton almost every trip.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's still a really strong sector in this part of Alberta, because we're in Calgary. So we're very familiar with agriculture to livestock, and not so much oil as much as it could have been, I guess, compared to a few years ago. But yeah, it's still a dominant part of our industry. So I guess then at what point you're cruising as a consultant and you're making an impact, did you decide, you know what, it's time to create a podcast? Kind of how did that shift happen?
It started years ago. And it took me a long time to do it because I was afraid to do it. Like so many of us, we're afraid to do something new. What are people going to think about us? How are they going to react? What's the reception going to be like? Anyways, I finally started it in February. And if you remember, it was 1.5 years ago I started it in February. And that was luckily right before COVID, because I started, my first episode got released in February, and then COVID shut us down in March of that year. And I already had like 4 episodes or 5 released by the time COVID hit. So it was something that was easy to keep rolling when you're locked in your office during COVID. But I'm up to 60 some episodes now. Nice. Mostly every week, but not necessarily. The last couple of weeks I've been working on a project, so I've missed, I think I've missed a few weeks in there, but hey, it's still progressing. Blessed with having people like you and Avery on the show, but blessed with having some of my mentors on the show, blessed to have new people that I've never met on the show and finding out about them. Yeah. That's the best part.
Yeah. We've watched you basically from the beginning then, because I was going to say it was probably around last March when your space became really relevant to us in that scene, which was really neat. And then there was a couple just with a different person that I saw you on the Thursday mornings that you were involved with, that was really solidified. Like I mentioned before, you're going to say it as it is. And if someone didn't know, you had the answer. So that's really neat. That's a really cool backstory too, because timing is everything. And really your timing couldn't have been much better in this space, because you're not alone being locked in the office, being locked at home. And yeah, I think people became a little more curious because there was less distraction. So if someone's speaking on something that's been, again, our podcast space is it's broad, but it's specific. And if someone's been wondering, what's a CVOR? What's this? Why do I hear this term? Then all of a sudden, oh, Safety Dawg has something that it describes exactly what it is. They're going to watch. And so, yeah, I think your timing was really good. And just, yeah, it's funny hearing, well, not funny in a sarcastic way, in a confidence way, when you described you were scared. What are people going to think? Because that's like, I know you can't see our full space that Avery and I are in, but we were sweating trying to prepare for what does this look like? Like literally trying to record on a camera together, and both of us just like so nervous. And you're like, does this suck? Is this good? Like, what is good anyway? And yeah, so I appreciate you sharing that, because I think others listening, because I have a couple of friends in our industry in the West that are also contemplating podcasts. And that's the part that they first go to is, what if no one listens? What if I suck? What if I stutter? And I'm like, then you suck and you stutter. But I'm like, after a couple, you stop sweating or you stop stuttering. So, but yeah, that's neat.
Think of the skills, not so much, well, for both of you, think of the skills that you are honing right now. One of my things, and I don't know why it took me so long, I probably had podcasts in the back of my mind for 2 years before I did it. And I love getting on stage in front of truck drivers. That's one of the things, if I had the opportunity, I would love to do that all the time.
Yep.
And so why was I hesitant to be recorded on video? Because it's more permanent, I think, is part of the answer. But yeah, it was scary. And I didn't know what I was going to talk about. I didn't know if people would agree to come on the show. And I've been blessed that everybody but one whom I have asked has agreed to come on the show. And that one said, my company won't let me. And it was one of the safety people for an insurance company. And I understand that. So it wasn't that they didn't want to come on the show. It was that they weren't allowed to come on the show. So a little bit different, but I've been blessed. People said, sure, I'll come on. Sounds like fun. So, you know.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, I think it's amazing that you guys are doing a podcast. Go ahead, Avery.
Oh, sorry. So speaking of the podcast, what has been your greatest joy when you doing the podcast?
My greatest joy. I think just meeting the people. I mean, the first greatest joy was getting the first episode released. Woo-hoo!
Yeah.
It wasn't, you know, as you guys will look back, I'm sure your first episode wasn't necessarily your best, but it was such an exciting thing to actually get out there. I think other than that, my most recent episode was really cool as well. And I think that's what it is for every recent episode, because it's foremost in your mind. And I learned something. And that's what I go into every episode thinking, what is it I'm going to learn? Even, you know, a total aside, one of the things that I do as an instructor is I have NATME courses. So North American Transportation Management Institute. I'm a facilitator for their courses. And I get people like Avery, like your dad in the room. And generally speaking, I'm the oldest one in the room, but it's a room full of safety people.
Yep.
And I go into that course and, you know, they call me an instructor. And I keep saying, no, I ain't the instructor. I'm the facilitator, because I'm here doing this canned presentation. But if I don't learn something in the next 4.5 days from you people, then something's wrong, because I'm not the smartest one in the room. I am one of the people in the room, and we're here exchanging knowledge. That's all we're doing. And so it's a lot of fun when I do those courses, and I learn something every one of those courses, because who in the heck knows everything?
Totally. Yeah,
Yep.
that's interesting. I'm gonna remember that when I facilitate too, because that's kind of been put on the shelf over the last 14 months or so, obviously, the in-class stuff. but I was in an online class not too long ago for investigations, and the instructor said something that I've used not just in health and safety environments, but just in life, is preventing reoccurrence. And me and Avery talk about choices and mistakes. It's father-son conversations. But I also talk to adults about the same thing. Was that a mistake or was that a choice? And if it was a choice, okay, let's dissect the choice to prevent it from happening again. But that term, prevent reoccurrence, has really stuck to me because I think a lot of professionals in the safety space, compliance and health and safety, think it's almost like holding a whip and do as I say. This is the law. When it's like, no, let's build a culture and let's build an area where people feel, okay, I made a bad choice, or I made a mistake. Sorry, I made a mistake. Okay, I learned from my mistake, so it's not going to happen again. Now everyone can grow from it instead of being afraid to admit, well, I was wrong. And like you said, if we're not smart, we don't want to be the smartest people in the room. We want to facilitate other people's ability to share. And again, watching Avery, proud dad moment for sure. It's neat. Like, we did an episode with it's his uncle, but one of my best friends who's an occupational therapist, and just hearing him, his name's Joel. So hearing him speak on people's mental health, but watching Avery connect dots while someone's speaking at a very high education, quote unquote, level was really neat. And I think if my 11-year-old can really grasp the value of our industry, the value that Chris, that you bring to our industry, to the fact that his grandpa's been an over-the-road professional for going on 45 years, and he can see the value in those people, I think, again, that's really neat. So there's a little bit of a proud dad tangent, but
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, absolutely. So Chris, one of my mentors asked this question in an interview, and it's funny, some people can answer it, some people can't. So I'm going to ask you, because I know you have the answer probably, is what do you believe your superpower is?
Superpower. Well, as I said, I love public speaking, and I believe, and I hope it's true, but you have to believe in yourself first of all. But I believe I can connect to truck drivers, and if you can connect to truck drivers and say things like safety in trucking, we say the same thing. We all say, hey, leave space. Hey, don't tailgate. Hey, don't speed. But as you were saying earlier, it's a choice. These drivers make choices every day to speed or to leave space. And you've got to say it in a way that connects with the driver so they understand why they need to leave space. And most often, one of the things I try to do is say it in a way that it's not for them. It's for their family. It's for their loved ones that they leave space.
Yes.
Because it is a choice. And I use the analogy, and this is really corny, but a truck driver dies in an accident, and now he's not at his daughter's wedding day. And he's not at his daughter's wedding day, but the daughter gets to speak to dad and says, hey, dad, why aren't you here? You died in a truck crash. What happened that day? Well, I was in a hurry for, whatever the reason is. It doesn't matter what the reason is, because there isn't a reason good enough, big enough to tailgate, to speed, to have a crash and possibly die and miss all this stuff. And so I try to say that in a way that's meaningful to truck drivers. And if I say it powerfully enough, then I hope 10% hear me.
Yes.
Just 10% in that room, because I know I'm not reaching everybody. But if I change just 10% of those people that listen, then I had a profound impact. And that's what I hope for. So, going back to the question, what's my superpower? I hope I can say things, I believe I can say things that I can actually affect emotion and beliefs of a small number of drivers, but I have an impact, and I have an impact on safety then. And of course, those of us in safety, like you, Josh, we don't know how many people's lives we've saved by changing a driver's behavior today.
Totally.
But that's our goal,
Yeah.
So I know we're coming up to a hard and fast stop here, if I can say one other thing, and I know that you have safety people listening to this, and back, I'm old enough to remember, or I'm old enough to have trained drivers with the new hours of service that came out in Canada. And if you remember when those came out, if you had to train drivers, typical truck driver meeting, everybody had a bitch, moan, and complain session. So my tip to you and to the other safety people, if you haven't heard this one before, is have a vote at the beginning of the meeting. And this is what I used to do, because my first session was really hard. But as soon as I implemented this policy, it was easy. So I'd say, okay, drivers, we're having a vote today. Are we going to have a 2-hour safety meeting or a 4-hour safety meeting? And they'd say, well, what's the topic? Oh, it's the same topic. Well, what's the difference? Well, in the 4-hour meeting, you get to bitch, moan, and complain. In the 2-hour meeting, you give me permission to say, no, that's bitch, moaning, and complaining. That's the other meeting. We don't do that today. Which meeting is it? And of course, everybody votes for the 2-hour meeting. And that gave me permission. As soon as somebody started to say, well, the government can't tell me. Oh, no. That's the 4-hour meeting. And everybody goes, oh, okay, yep, that's the 4-hour meeting. So I got to politely say to them, because that's what I would do. I'd say, that's the 4-hour meeting. I didn't say, no, that's bitch, moaning, and complaining. But by saying it's the 4-hour meeting, they knew what I meant. And we got back on topic very quickly. So if you ever have to deliver a hard message that drivers are going to have something to say about, and of course a lot of us have something to say about it, you might consider having a vote at the beginning to control the meeting. Anyways, that's it for me.
That's powerful. I haven't heard that before, but that's a really good idea. I'm actually, I make notes as you talk, because then it helps me remember really key points. So I have 18 sticky notes, so thank you. But that's something that I'm going to definitely share that too, because I think, you still want to be heard. You still want to give the opportunity, obviously, to allow someone to vent, but at the same time, keeping it in context. So that's a really smart idea. I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, venting is not healthy for the meeting. Asking questions is healthy for the meeting. So as long as, like in that case, it was hours of service, as long as they were asking a question about a point that I didn't make clear, that's of huge value. But saying the government can't tell me to do this, that's of no value to anybody.
Totally. Yes.
So Chris, that was amazing, and thank you for that. Do you have any
Avery.
final thoughts? Yeah, no problem. Do you have any final thoughts for today?
No, I just really appreciate being asked to come on the show. I appreciate Josh and the work that he does, and I really appreciate him for what he's trying to do with you, Avery. So
Yeah.
Congrats to both of you. Avery, congrats for accepting the challenge, and Josh, congrats for giving. I mean, how many other 11-year-olds have the skill now to come on camera and to ask questions of somebody that is 50 some odd years, I'm not good at math, Avery, but 50 some odd years older than you, and you've done a great job. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. So Chris, just first of all, thank you so much for joining the podcast today, and we all thank you. We all love that you were able to join us today. And to everyone who's listening right now or watching, we highly recommend you go in contact with Chris, and we will share his contact information down below.
Yeah, that was Chris. Honestly, this is a big highlight for us. Appreciate your mentorship, like I said at the beginning, and I love hearing other people speak confidence into Avery, because it solidifies a few things. So I know, again, without going on too much of a tangent, it's just super impactful for an 11-year-old to hear compliment, because then he speaks compliment. And I listen to how Avery talks to his friends, how he talks to his little brother, and he does speak what he's hearing. So the fact that you can reiterate countless times in a way he can hear, it means a lot. And I think when we first started this, I don't know if that was as much of a focus as it is now, more so for Avery's development as a young leader. There's different ways that we're hoping to use this platform to kind of influence schools and youth. And I think Avery really can absorb that type of feedback. So thank you very much. And even for myself, I know it's being obviously a couple kilometers apart, the value of Zoom, the value of social media is there. And I just like the fact that, yeah, we're able to share, even though how we say things can be different, it's the impact that we're having is very, I think we're like-minded in that way. So it's nice just being able to share. So thank you very much for coming on. It means a lot.
Oh, as I say, I think you are doing some great things with Avery, coaching him along the, being a good example. And that's not always easy, right? Avery, if you ever get the chance, I've read his books. I've read 2 of his books, but Tony Robbins, I wouldn't recommend you reading his books because God, I struggle to read the darn thing. But if you get him on YouTube or something, he is very impactful. And I almost brought him up when you were talking about, Josh, when Josh was talking about decision making, because in one of his books, and I think it was Awaken the Giant, he talks about what's the difference between humans and animals. Well, animals, if they turn around and bite you, it's instinct. It's just a reaction, and you're not going to train that out of them. The difference between that and you and I, if Josh says something to me and I punch him, believe it or not, there was a split second there that I chose to punch him. And, you know what I mean? I chose it. Now, yes, it may have been programmed, and yes, I may have made that same decision many times before, but I chose it. And when I heard him say that, he says it in a way, at least, that it resonated with me. When I heard that, and I started thinking about some of my reactions to situations, that I used to believe, well, that's just my reaction. Excuse my language, you pissed me off, and that's how I'm going to react. No, that's how I choose to react, because nobody else has permission to make you do anything but you. You know what I mean? We choose to be in a good mood, or we choose to allow something to affect our mood.
Yep.
And anyways, this is all Tony Robbins stuff, and there's other really good public speakers like that too. But Tony's an older guy. He's younger than I am, I think, but he's got to be pushing 60. But I've watched him for probably 30 years.
Wow.
Anyways, and I know your dad's heard of Tony Robbins.
Oh yeah, we're big in that space. I really appreciate Tony's. I love when he talks about raising your standard and controlling a room. Actually, a friend of our mutual, we were talking the other day about when you're first entering a space where there's a large audience in front of you. And I referred to Tony's ability to say, if you agree, say I. So then everyone's yelling I. And I'm like, yeah, that type of energy and just the control. But yeah, raising your standards is something that I rely on all the time when, say, I have a bad attitude. I'm like, no, I don't want to be that person. Let's shift. And then who do you want to? So yeah, we align very much with that. But yeah, again, Chris, this was awesome. This meant a lot to Avery and I. So thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate the opportunity. Good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have
Bye.
a great day.
Have a good Calgary day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Yeah, you too.
Well, that's all for today's episode. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Honestly, it's just nice to learn more about you. It's nice to be able to reciprocate the kind gesture that you did with us by having you on the Truck Focus podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for joining. And everyone who's listening or watching right now, make sure you go check out his podcast.
That's right. So all of his details are in the show notes below. And again, Chris, thank you so much. It just means the world for all of the support. Everyone listening, to all of our dedicated listeners, or maybe if you're a new listener, thank you so much for the support. Avery and I have been working tirelessly just to try and create a pivotal impact in the transportation industry, and it's because of the support from you that it's possible. So thank you so much. If you are watching this on YouTube, I do ask that you subscribe by hitting that little button, that hit subscribe button. That way you get notified when there's more episodes. If you're watching this or listening to this on any other platform, I do ask that you like, you share, you subscribe, continue to spread the word, because the greater the following, the greater the impact. So thank you so much and have a great day. Bye.
Bye.